Tom spent his days selling trinkets in a bustling marketplace, his earnings barely enough to buy bread and pay for his small room. Despite his struggles and a leg weakened by an old injury, he greeted everyone with a warm smile. One afternoon, a desperate woman approached him, her trembling hands clutching her worn shawl. "Please," she whispered, "my children haven't eaten in 2 days." Tom looked at the small pile of coins he had earned that day, just enough for his own meal. But with a heavy heart, he handed her everything he had, knowing it meant he'd go to bed hungry. Hours later, as Tom prepared to close his store, a sleek car pulled up, and the same woman stepped out, now dressed elegantly. What she revealed next about herself would turn Tom's simple act of kindness into a story that would change his life and inspire the world. Hi everyone. Welcome to Graceful Storyteller. Today we bring you a story of generosity, transformation, and the incredible ripple effect of kindness. Tom worked double shifts at a small market stall in downtown Chicago, selling handmade trinkets to anyone willing to stop and glance. Despite his charm and the uniqueness of his creations, he barely made enough to pay rent for his tiny apartment. His leg, injured in an accident years ago, made standing all day difficult, but his warm smile never faded. Life was tough, but Tom's resilience and kindness kept him going. One cold afternoon, a frail woman approached his store. Her clothes were worn, and she clutched a thin shawl around her shoulders. Her face told a story of struggle. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, her voice shaking. I haven't eaten in 2 days, and my children, they're hungry. Can you spare anything?" Tom's gaze fell to the small pile of coins he had earned that day. It was just enough for his own dinner and breakfast the next morning. He hesitated, his heart heavy. Giving her the money would mean going hungry himself. But as he looked into her tear-filled eyes, he made a decision. Without a word, Tom took every coin from his cash box and handed it to her. "Take this," he said softly, forcing a smile. "Your children need it more than I do." The woman's hands trembled as she accepted the money. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise I'll repay your kindness someday." Tom watched her walk away, disappearing into the crowd. His stomach growled, but his heart felt strangely full. Little did he know, this simple act of generosity would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The sun was setting, and the market was closing down. Tom packed his unsold items into his worn-out bag, his body aching from the day's work. Just as he was about to leave, a sleek black car pulled up beside his store. The door opened, and to Tom's shock, the same woman stepped out, but she looked completely different. Her tattered clothes were replaced by an elegant coat, and her face, now radiant and confident, was almost unrecognizable. "Tom," she said warmly, approaching him with a smile, "you didn't just help me today. You've changed my life." Tom stared at her, unable to speak. She introduced herself as Rachel Carter, a philanthropist known for her work with underprivileged communities. "I came to the market today in disguise," she explained. "I wanted to find someone who still believed in kindness, even when they had little to give. And you, Tom, showed me the truest form of generosity." Before Tom could respond, Rachel handed him an envelope. His hands shook as he opened it, revealing a check with an amount so large it made his knees weak. Inside was also a handwritten note, "For the man who gave me everything when he had nothing. May this help you continue spreading your light." Tears filled Tom's eyes as he looked up at Rachel. I don't know what to say," he stammered. Rachel smiled gently. "You don't need to say anything," she replied. "Just promise me you'll keep being the kind person you are." The next morning, Tom arrived at the market to find a crowd gathered around his stall. News of his act of kindness had spread, and customers lined up to buy his trinkets and hear his story. A journalist approached him, microphone in hand, asking about his decision to give away all his earnings. Tom's humble response only endeared him further to the growing crowd. As the days passed, Tom's story went viral. Donations began pouring in from strangers who were moved by his selflessness. Rachel continued to support him, introducing him to influential people who shared her vision of spreading kindness. With their help, Tom transformed his market stall into a thriving business, but he didn't stop there. Tom used a portion of his earnings to start a small community kitchen, offering free meals to anyone in need. "Kindness always comes back," he would say to those who asked why he gave so freely. "It's the least I can do." One cold evening, a young man approached Tom at the community kitchen. His clothes were ragged, and his eyes were filled with shame. "I haven't eaten in 2 days," he admitted quietly. Tom smiled and handed him a plate of hot food. "You don't need to explain," he said gently. "Everyone deserves a warm meal." The man sat down and ate in silence, but before leaving, he turned to Tom. "You don't know me," he said, "but a year ago, I was living on these streets. Someone told me about this kitchen, and it gave me the strength to keep going. I have a job now, and I just wanted to thank you." Tom's heart swelled with pride as he watched the man leave. Moments like these reminded him of the ripple effect of kindness. He often thought back to that day in the market and how one small act had led to so much change. Months later, Tom's community kitchen expanded into a full-fledged shelter, offering food, beds, and job training to those in need. Rachel continued to support his efforts, helping him secure funding and connect with other organizations. Together, they opened additional shelters in neighboring towns, spreading their mission far and wide. One day, Rachel approached Tom with exciting news. "We've been approved for a grant," she said. "It's enough to open 3 more shelters in the next year." Tom was overwhelmed. "I never imagined this would happen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to help a few people." Rachel smiled. "And you have. But now, you're helping hundreds." As the years passed, Tom's shelters became a beacon of hope for the homeless and struggling. His story inspired countless others to take action, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could create monumental change. One morning, as Tom prepared to open the shelter, a familiar face walked through the door. It was the same young man he had helped at the community kitchen, now dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase. "Tom," he said, smiling, "I got a promotion at work and I want to give back." He handed Tom a check, the amount enough to fund the shelter for an entire year. Tom's eyes filled with tears as he accepted the donation. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You've come so far." The man nodded. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he said. "Your kindness saved my life." Today, Tom's legacy lives on. His shelters have helped thousands of people find food, shelter, and a fresh start. The sign outside his first shelter still reads, "Kindness always comes back," a reminder of the day he gave everything he had to a stranger in need. Tom often reflects on that moment in the market, remembering the fear and hesitation he felt before handing over his earnings. "I didn't know what would happen," he says, "but I knew I couldn't turn her away. And that decision changed my life." As he stands in the bustling shelter, watching volunteers serve meals and families find warmth, Tom smiles. He knows that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to create a ripple effect that can change the world. Love this story? Let us know in the comments how it made you feel.